Barakatuh. We've got some homework to do, ladies, but before we start doing our homework, let's just go over a little bit about what we talked about last time. All right. So we talked about um, uh, the ayah, يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير. And we went in some details in regards to what Al-Qurtubi had to say about anzalna. So we said, is it khalaqna? Is it to mean send down? What does that actually mean? And we said the differences of opinions right there. And when we said libasa yuwari sawatikum and libasu taqwa, or is it in another qira'ah, libasat taqwa, ذلك خير, the definition of taqwa, is taqwa related to the religion itself, meaning piety, meaning pious actions? Are we talking about pious words? Are we talking about a metaphor here that this is basically referring to how we practice our inner self, our inner submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what we put on as an identity? So that was one thing. Then the second, or there were almost 10 different opinions, but the second literal interpretation, they said libasu taqwa is actually talking about any let's call it any combat clothing. So we're talking about a shield, we're talking about a helmet, we're talking about perhaps maybe the arms, the legs, just different things that are used in defense. That's libas or taqwa, because, and they took that from taqwa, that is basically anything that you would use in order to protect yourself. So that's where they took it from. There were some questions. I do recognize that. So we're just going to open up some of the things that were asked about. So let me start with the questions that Ustaza Umayya laid out, and then Kulsum, I'm going to take your questions as well. So I'm going to go over some of the questions that Ustaza Umayya basically sent me. So she went over, remember when we talked about a man's aura and a woman's aura, and we went in details with it. So she actually went a mile farther and decided to actually download the book that we talked about, and which basically was the book that we talked about from Aluka. It was called Men's Aura. It was in 22 pages. So she actually went farther. She downloaded it, she printed out the book, and she wanted to basically ask about some of the words in the hadith. So let's see right there. She looked at this hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ, or at least Sahl bin Sa'd, he basically said, كان رجال يصلون مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عاقدي أزورهم على أعناقهم كهيئة الصبيان or الصبيان ويقال للنساء لا ترفعن رؤوسكن حتى يستوي الرجال جلوسا. So the hadith, you could see it's in Sahih al-Bukhari. What is it actually saying? That the men would pray with the Prophet ﷺ, and they would also, the garment that they used to wear, I would say it's probably very similar, based on the description, very similar to the way that Yemeni men would dress. So they would have kind of like a skirt, and then it would be something that they would tie along with it, kind of like a belt, but it would be tied, and they wouldn't necessarily be wearing something underneath it. And that's why it said, عَقِدِي أُزُورِهِمْ عَلَى أَعْنَاقِهِمْ. At the same time, they would also have another cloth that basically would cover them from the top, and it was basically direction from the Prophet ﷺ that he told the women not to raise their heads until the man would be in the complete sitting posture. So what was that actually for? Well, that was because there's of course, more sutra for the men. Yes, they're in the front, but it can happen that something might get uncovered, etc. So the Prophet ﷺ was directing the women to not raise their heads after doing sujood right away, and to actually wait till the men would rise in a complete resting or slash sitting position in order to make sure that the men are in a complete modest position and the women would be basically in sujood. So the sujood for women, it was prescribed that they would wait until the men would be in a complete sitting position to make sure that the men are in a modest position. Okay, let's see. In here, أستاذ أمي was saying يبدو أنهن في صف خلف الرجال تماما وهو شر الصفوف. So it doesn't have to be that they were directly, like right behind the men. There can be some space between the two, but at the end, they're definitely visible. It wasn't like a different floor or a different space. No, it definitely is clear that the Prophet ﷺ was giving the women the instructions, and that women weren't necessarily directly right after them, but there was some space. But at the end of the day, they were capable of seeing one another. Okay, so here, رواه Muslim and من ضيق الأزر. So من ضيق الأزر is basically talking about that their garment sometimes may actually be tight on the men. So the men's garment might sometimes be tight. So the Prophet ﷺ was instructing women in order to help them focus on their salah. Yes, at the end, as women or men, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically had instructed us to do lowering the gaze and to lower our gaze, and certainly part of lowering the gaze even during salah. Okay, let's see. And here she wanted to also ask about وَإِن كَانَ ضَيِّقًا فَاتَّزَرَ بِهِ. So even when it talks about the Prophet ﷺ, of course, when Nabi ﷺ أرشد جابرا بقوله وإن كان ضيقا فاتزر به. Okay, so إن كان ضيقا فاتزر به. So if, let's say, they're wearing something like trousers or wearing something underneath, then in that situation, the Prophet ﷺ basically instructed Jabir ibn Abdullah وإن كان ضيقا فاتزر به. And if it is something that is tight, then what you need to do is basically wear something like a skirt to cover it. I know in Malaysia, the boys wear, it is part of their traditional clothing, which I mainly see them wearing during the Eid, when they would wear basically it's like pants underneath, and then they would have like a skirt on top of it that would fold on top. So that's fattazir bihi. Maybe I can actually show you that. Let me maybe show you what Malaysian clothing looks like, because it is actually based on the Sunnah. Hold on. Let's see, traditional Malaysian clothing. Let's see right there. So this is the traditional male clothing. And here we go. So they would be wearing, basically, you could see, if it's tight, they would always have this sheet on top, and then they would fold this. So this isn't
Can
a
we see it,
belt.
please? Can we see
Oh,
it,
you can't
please?
see it?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. So here we go. So they would basically, this is they're just normal pants, and then this would be another sheet. And this sheet on top, it would not have a belt. It's just a normal sheet. And then, of course, they would tighten it, and it would basically be folded. So this is a fold right there from the actual sheet right there. So this would be basically what the Prophet ﷺ was instructing Jabir ibn Abdullah to do, which is to, if it is tight, فَاتَّزِرْ بِهِ. This is al-izar.
So
And certainly,
it's tight that form the عورة.
absolutely,
مجسم للعورة. For that he has to do that. يعني
he has to do that.
حياء.
Haya,
Like the
exactly.
Pakistani izar. So
Well, the Pakistani would dress differently. It would
yeah,
be
but it's
different. But the
for,
Yemeni,
but
this is
at the end
actually
to cover the عورة.
right. This is
Forming.
also inspired by the Yemeni, because remember the ones to men clothing, let's do it that way. The Yemenis were the ones that actually had a big influence on the Malaysian culture and even their religion. So this is what they would wear. So this is the Yemeni as well. Until the time of today, this is how they dress. And certainly that was probably what inspired the Malaysians to dress this way, when the Yemenis were the ones that actually brought Islam to Malaysia, by the way, through all the caravans and all the, well, not caravans, but basically the trade and the business that they were doing. So they were also giving them Islam as well. So you could see, the Yemeni clothing really inspiring the Malaysian clothing as well. So at the end, is that what we were talking about in answering that question that you basically had indicated right there? وَإِن كَانَ ضَيِّقًا فَاتَّزِرْ بِهِ. If it is tight, then what you have to wear is an izar on top of it. So is this going to be something that we can also say the same if the man was actually wearing something like a jeans, maybe jeans trousers or anything of that? Yeah, definitely. That definitely would actually be coming from the same idea, in that certainly this is the prophetic direction for men and what they need to do. Okay, let's see here. In the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith that was narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, so here we go in the Sahihain, and that the Prophet ﷺ كان ينقل معهم الحجارة للكعبة. The Prophet ﷺ was helping them basically carry the different stones to the Kaaba, and he was wearing an izar. An izar would basically mean kind of like what the Yemeni clothing looked like, what I just told you, kind of like a skirt, and it would be tied on top. And then Al-Abbas said, if you would probably just loosen your izar, which is the skirt piece of it. And then the Prophet ﷺ, فَجَعَلْتَ عَلَى مِنْكَبَيْكَ دُونَ الْحِجَارَةِ. And then the Prophet, Al-Abbas, basically his uncle, said, and then that way you can just put that skirt on top and it'll help you, in other words, with your movement, and it wouldn't be obstructing you from moving about. So the Prophet ﷺ attempted to literally, I guess, loosen that up. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ basically fell and basically went into like like fainting position. So he got into like a coma or fainted, and his body was not uncovered. So what does that mean? She said, well, does that mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want the Prophet ﷺ to get uncovered? Well, that's the only thing that we can understand from this hadith. Definitely, that's the only thing that we understand from this hadith, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asimahu, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him infallible even before Islam. Now, mind you, this hadith was actually, or the attempt of wanting to loosen up that lower garment that he was wearing, that was actually before Islam. That was before Islam, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made the Prophet ﷺ infallible from committing sin even before Islam. Let's see the other question that she was asking about, which is Al-Awza'i. He basically said, Al-fakhidhu awra wa laysat bi'awratin fil hammam. Okay, let's see. And here you said, well, wait a minute, what about soccer? Okay, so al-fakhidhu awra, we did talk about hadith jarhad, which the Prophet ﷺ had basically told Jarhad, al-fakhidhu awra, غطي فخذك al-fakhidhu awra. Cover your thigh, for the thigh is a awra. And yet there's another hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari when the Prophet ﷺ, Anas had said that when the Prophet ﷺ was walking in the alleys of Khaybar, that he basically had seen the Prophet ﷺ's thigh, and it was a white thigh. So he was capable of literally describing what he had seen. And in Hasar al-Izar, whether that was him doing it intentionally or whether that was an unintentional thing, differences of opinions between scholars. But at the end, the Prophet ﷺ did tell Jarhad, غطي فخذك, cover your thigh. So then the scholars had, the debate whether this hadith, which is غطي فخذك, and we said, is it, well, number one, it's mu'allaq, meaning that chain of narration is an incomplete chain of narration, but then you had other scholars basically find the missing link in it. But here, Al-Awza'i wanted to comment on that, and well, actually, his fatwa, al-fakhidh awra, he said, al-fakhidh, or men's thighs, are a awra, and therefore they must be covered. And he said, وَلَيْسَتْ بِعَوْرَةٍ فِي الْحَمَّامِ, and it is not a awra in al-hammam. Before I describe al-hammam, I think it's important to understand. Al-hammam, they were not known in the area of Mecca. What is al-hammam? Al-hammam were public showers. And those public showers were more known in the areas that were controlled by the Byzantine Empire. They had public showers. It was an area where the public shower, think of Moroccan showers, a public shower, and there would be this person that would basically be the person to scrub, and an area where they would basically heat water, and it would be all full of course, vapor, because there's an area where the water's getting heated, an area where the person's getting scrubbed, and an area where they're just, kind of like a spa type of thing. So
Like
that was
jacuzzi in our days, jacuzzi.
exactly like a jacuzzi, like a spa, all of that. That was something that was famous in the areas that were controlled by the Byzantine Empire. Differences of opinions between scholars, because the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that he was telling the Sahaba that you're going to come across areas when, in other words, when the Muslim governance is expanding, and when it expands, they're going to come across something which is called al-hammam. And the Prophet ﷺ was telling them that you're going to come across areas where they will have these public bathrooms or these public shower rooms. For the men, he basically instructed that if a man enters, فَلَا يَدْخُلُ الْحَمَّامَ إِلَّا بِإِزَارٍ, that they should only enter these public shower rooms with izar. And for women, he said, فَلَا تَدْخُلِ الْحَمَّامِ. For women, he said, do not enter these public shower rooms, period. Okay. Now, all the ahadith, just really quick, I'll make it really short. All the hadith that relate to preventing women from entering these public shower rooms are actually not authentic. And some scholars debated, they went into the debate of which one is Hassan. Is it Hassan? How do we basically defend this hadith, or they went into these debates. I'll just make the story short. So when you look at al-Awza'i was a Lebanese scholar. He was from Lebanon. And Lebanon was definitely controlled by the Byzantine Empire at one point. So the shower still existed. Okay. Al-Awza'i is way after the fall of the empire, the Byzantine Empire, no question about that. But some of the tradition of these public shower rooms still did exist within Lebanon, Syria, and of course Egypt as well. So we're talking about all the areas that were controlled by the Byzantine Empire. It was still existing even after the fall of the Byzantine Empire. So here, when he said وَلَيْسَتْ بِعَوْرَةٍ فِي الْحَمَّامِ, so we're talking about this is an area of a public shower room. So he's saying it would be aura, but if they're in, let's say, in public shower rooms, it would not be aura. That's basically his take on it. And here she's asking about, well, what about things like soccer? Okay, well, when we're talking about a soccer, that we don't necessarily do qiyas and say laysat bi'awra, oh, what about soccer? Is it included or not? Is this saying that it's not a awra is al-Awza'i's opinion that it wouldn't be a awra in al-hammam or in these public shower rooms? Because anyways, there's a men's shower room and a women's shower room and a separate women's shower room? Or is this necessarily just saying, well, this is umum al-balwa, it would be really hard to take a shower, and at the same time, certainly the man can't go naked even in front of men. Okay, so those fitness areas and the public showers and the fitness areas would be completely haram, not acceptable. Even if it's a man in front of a man, you cannot uncover completely in front of men. Period. No scholar ever permitted that whatsoever. They did, though, have differences of opinions on the level or the amount of a man's aura in front of a man's aura, whether it's only exclusive to the aura itself or whether the thigh is included. That's what we were basically discussing. So for the scholars that said a man's thigh is aura, then they went into a further debate. Well, how much is a thigh? Is it up to the knee? Or is it a lower area more towards, I guess, the beginning? How much of that thigh? Is it up to the knee? Is it a little bit below the knee? Is the knee included? That's when they get into the debate of that. And that's why al-Bukhari basically said hadith jarhad ahwat. That's why al-Bukhari said that the hadith of Jarhad, when the Prophet ﷺ had said, غطي فخذك, cover your fakhid, for the fakhid or the thigh is a awra. Or Bukhari himself actually said, hadith jarhad, this hadith is ahwat, meaning it is safer. So even for those that are playing soccer, it doesn't go out of the debate that we just mentioned. And al-hammam, we just described that, al-hammam. Okay, now to go for the other question, and that would be the last question for Ustaz Umayyah right there. Let's see right there and what the question basically says. Okay, so their evidence is that the Prophet ﷺ كان مضطجعا في بيته كاشفا عن فخذه. The Prophet ﷺ was basically, I guess, in a reclining position, and he was basically in his own home, and his thigh was uncovered. Abu Bakr seeks permission to come in. The Prophet ﷺ gives him the permission, and the Prophet ﷺ basically stayed in the same position that he was in, didn't really change anything. And then Umar ibn Khattab knocks at the door, or, well, it wasn't a door, but I guess, takes the permission. Why did I say door? Because they didn't all have doors. They would basically have curtains sometimes. Not everyone had a door. Okay, the doors didn't actually happen till later, but at the time, most of them only had curtains, not doors. Okay, so Umar al-Khattab asks permission, then he basically permits him to come in. The Prophet ﷺ didn't change the position, and that's when Uthman bin Affan basically seeks permission, and Uthman bin Affan, the Prophet ﷺ, right away, he changed his position when Uthman bin Affan basically seek permission, and he basically had perfected his clothes. All right. And then Uthman bin Affan basically talks to the Prophet ﷺ, leaves. Then Sayyida Aisha said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, Abu Bakr comes in. You did not change your position whatsoever. You didn't mind. And Umar al-Khattab, you didn't mind. You didn't change your position. You didn't. But when Uthman bin Affan comes in, you basically sat up. You, I guess, mended your clothes, or you fixed your clothes in a certain way." And the Prophet ﷺ responded, "Should I not be shy from a man that the malaika are shy from?" Okay, so here she's asking, well, when you're number one is that wajh dalala. Wajh dalala actually means what is the theme of well, where was the place of their I guess their argument. What are they trying to say in bringing up that hadith? That the Prophet ﷺ had uncovered his thigh, or at least his thigh was uncovered in front of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn al-Khattab. And but yet, when we're speaking about Uthman bin Affan coming in, he basically fixed it. So here the discussion is بعدم ثبوت الجزم بذكر الفخذ. All right. So the area of question was, did Sayyida Aisha basically kashifan an fakhidhay? Is that an extra piece of the hadith? What is called al-mudraj. So what does that mean? When you say muttaji'an fi baytihi, was that the end of it? Or that kashifan an fakhidhay, that he was uncovering his thighs, was that something that probably as an inference that the narrator had understood? Was that that's what is called al-mudraj. Was that necessarily an inference coming from the narrator, or was that literally said by Sayyida Aisha? Okay, so when we're talking about al-fakhid is different than al-saq. Since you're asking about al-saq, al-fakhid is different than al-saq. Al-saq would be all the leg, basically. Al-fakhid would be the thigh. So that was the area of question. Okay, now I believe Kulsum, you also had certain questions, dear. So go ahead, dear. I know.
Jazakallah khair for the answering.
وإياكم. So, Kulsum, if you don't want to, if you don't
Yes,
want
yes.
to,
Assalamu alaikum.
go ahead. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So my question was regarding yesterday's session where you mentioned the different libas for concubines or even slave women
Mhm.
versus like the free women. So I just wanted to know why the difference was there, like with regards to like covering or libas or hijab or anything within that realm.
Fair enough. I would say number one, before I would talk about anything in regards to slavery, I think the most important book that we would read is for Jonathan Brown. It's Slavery in Islam for Jonathan Brown. And I think he had done a really good job in explaining slavery in Islam and how it's different, etc. But to also answer your question, of course, it's a whole system that basically required a certain distinction for both, because if one were to perhaps maybe relate with a woman that was free, the implication would be different, and therefore they needed to actually identify who's who, because the implications on each is different. So if, let's say, a concubine or a slave woman were to commit a sin, she would basically get half the punishment. But if the man were, but if a free woman were to commit the sin, she would get full punishment. All right. Let me give you an example. How full punishment, let's say for qadf, a woman speaking about another woman, for example, giving an insinuating an insinuation or insinuating that she had committed zina and she didn't bring forward witnesses. If that's a woman that made such a claim, then she would get 80 lashes if it's a free woman. If it was a woman that was a slave woman, she would get 40. Now, the responsibilities on slave women, definitely working in services, definitely working in very hard tasks, to put on hijab on them would actually make their work harder. So that was another reason. Another reason. So number one, we're talking about the responsibilities. Religious responsibilities are different, at least in some religious responsibilities. Two, social responsibilities are different. And three, the implications of how we would also regulate the amount of dress, the amount of uncovering would also be different to suit the situation that included both of the things that I had mentioned. Did I explain that one?
Yeah. So basically, because in my mind I was just questioning like they're still women, and if like the law of Allah, like for hijab or the whole libas, should be for all women. But you're saying that no, it's different because the religious responsibility is different, the social responsibility is different, and the last one you said was implications of how we regulate would be different. That's why
Right.
like they're not. It's not further upon them, I guess.
Exactly. So they are part of the system, but the system
Yeah,
did recognize that
yeah,
there's the social status being different actually
yeah,
meant that they would hold different roles, and therefore it would be fair to
yeah.
reduce from the obligations, which already is tough on them from the start.
Okay, all right.
But I
Yeah,
would
perfect.
really recommend reading the book
The
Jonathan
book.
Brown had written about slavery. That's a must
Okay.
to read, a real must to read. I think he did. I don't think anybody had done a job in covering slavery as much as he had basically served this
Yeah.
topic.
Okay, perfect. All right. Jazakumullah khair, Shifa.
وإياكم. Okay, should we continue? Let's see. And here's another question in the chat. But what if it is the opposite? At times, instead of feeling entitled, a person may go to the other extreme and assume responsibility for everything. This can result in taking on others' burdens. I would assume she's talking about men and women, the part that we talked about that. Let's see. The question, Okay, so I think we answered that one. Okay, now let's get into our tafsir right there, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll be covering يا بني آدم لا يفتننكم الشيطان كما أخرج أبويكم من الجنة ينزع عنهما لباسهما ليريهما سوآتهما إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم. So let's look into that ayah, and where is it in regards to this one? We're doing this ayah. يا بني آدم, write this ayah right there. إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم إنا جعلنا الشياطين أولياء للذين لا يؤمنون. Let's give a general, or let's call it a surface translation first. O children of Adam, do not let the shaitan. So of course, in Arabic, we would usually have the verb coming before the noun, or before basically the subject or the object. So do not let shaitan, this is right there, shaitan, and لا يفتننكم, do not let shaitan sway you or delude you away as the way that he had deluded or had expelled Adam from Jannah and uplifting the garments for their private parts were exposed. He is capable of seeing you, him and his tribes, when you are not capable of seeing them. We had made the shayateen, or the demons, supporters for the ones that do not believe. That was a horrible translation. But let's go further to get a proper translation. And al-Qurtubi wanted to say that there were two different matters that he wanted to basically talk about. What is the word yaftinannakum? The root fatana is basically where this word comes from. The root fatana. Let me explain the root fatana, because this is extremely important in order to understand the right meaning and the right translation. The root is fatana. What does the root mean? Fatana actually means to expose something. That's the first meaning. Fatana could also mean to sift something. Okay, let's write it down. So we're talking about exposing. I'm going to write it down. Exposing, okay, and sifting, okay? When you're talking about sifting, what sifting are you talking about? Like sifting flour? No, not like sifting flour. This is talking about sifting gold from the different pebbles that might be there. So what do? You expose it. Here's the word exposing. You expose it on heat. When you expose it on heat, the gold will melt, but the pebbles will not. So you put it into something to sift it with, and then you put it on fire, and then the gold will melt, and then you'll be capable of gathering the gold by exposing it on the fire, which just melted, and then you'll basically not have the rocks and the pebbles and probably the soil melt, because it doesn't melt even if it was exposed on fire. So that's what fatana means. So you're exposing something, and plus you're sifting it. So that's yaftinakum or yaftinannakum. That's the root fatana. But the other meaning for fatana could also be to sway one away from something. In other words, what you're doing is that you're redirecting them. So when you say لا يفتننكم, لا يفتننكم, this is to let us know we're looking at a number of different things here. Number one is that right there, that this is an ongoing thing. This is a present tense. And يفتننكم is letting us know that shadda, we said that shadda means a couple things. The shadda can mean one, something that is gradually happening. Two, something that is persistent. Three, something that is consistent. 4, something that is basically exaggerated or something that is reflecting hyperbole. Which one of these is it? So it's actually the first 3. So لا يفتننكم, do not let shaitan, 1, gradually sway you away from haqq by exposing you to the different fitan that may be out there, or to the different things that may take you out of the right path. That would be by that. There's another meaning for fitna. You would say in some ayat, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَنَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ fitna. All right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically expose us on khair, on evil, and on good as a fitna. Well, wait a minute. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making the fitna here? No, let's explain it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may let you go through certain hardships, or may even give you certain privileges. But just because that looks like a privilege, it doesn't mean you deserve it. The privilege and the hardship might actually be a fitna. What is a fitna here? That it's sifting you. In other words, it is making you pure. How is it making me pure? It would be making you pure by taking away all the different contaminations, all the different weaknesses. So how does that even work? When you are patient and when you give up on certain desires, let's say you have gold or you have money, and with the money you can buy a lot of different things. You can get a lot of different privileges, and of course it gives you perhaps maybe different privileges to eat more, to probably get into all these different luxurious lifestyles, etc. But are you going to use it in order to get into dunya farther in dunya? Or are you going to use that wealth to probably donate, to probably do something else with it? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to use that khair for you getting closer to Jannah or getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when we say sifting gold and pebble away from pebbles, we're talking about the different meaning of fitna in that ayah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically said, نبلوكم بالشر والخير فتنة. Here, لا يفتننكم actually means do not let shaitan expose the different fitna upon you. In other words, when we're speaking about fitna here, you want to remember that exposing yourself onto the different fitan. So sometimes you're probably scrolling on a reels or something like that, and certain things might appear, and you start wanting to know more information about this famous person, this celebrity, and what their life is, all of that. That is exposing yourself onto the different ways of that lifestyle that will be a fitna onto you. Sometimes, in fact, it is part of religious therapy that you do not expose yourself onto these matters. That's one method that shaitan will use, is by exposing the methods of probably stealing, the methods of zina, the methods of probably taking drugs, intoxicants, etc. I remember the DARE program when I was a young girl. There was a program. It was the DARE to keep kids away from drugs. In this program, they basically were introducing the different types of drugs and the different types of drugs and how it is basically introduced to you, and different methods that they might actually invite you to taking them or using them, etc. But further studies actually had shown that program, which certainly its intention was to protect the children from these substances, it in fact invited them to using these substances. And it did not do any service to helping the children stay away from drugs, but in fact, it basically had exposed this whole industry of drug making and drug abuse to these innocent children. And definitely, it basically did not serve, but it actually exposed that. And sometimes, just like Umar ibn Khattab, he said, "اقضوا على الشر بعدم ذكره." Sometimes you have to eliminate evil by not mentioning it. Then, of course, we would talk about maybe different methods of how we can bring awareness without exposing fitna. Without exposing fitna, not every single thing that you would know, you would necessarily share, sometimes maintaining the innocence, and sometimes, of course, maintaining part of our spirituality and part of our tazkiyah sometimes is necessary by not getting ourselves exposed to that area, by not getting yourself directly being part of it. And that's the same thing when the Prophet ﷺ actually said, "Man kathara sawada qawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever adds a number to any group of people, then you are part of them, whether in subscribing and following or probably being present with these people that are probably in some kind of a concert or whatever it is. You are part of that group. You had exposed yourself and exposed your eyes, exposed your ears, exposed your heart to that lifestyle. So part of al-fitna that is used is basically by exposing the fitan upon us. That's the same thing. In the context of this ayah, if you were to look at the context of it and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically had let us know from the ayah the previous ayah when Adam alayhi salam had basically eaten from the tree, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then basically gave the theme lesson. The theme lesson, after telling us the story of Prophet Adam alayhi salam and Iblis and etc. and what actually happened, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed basically the speech at us. Ya Bani Adam, Ya Bani Adam. Here we go twice to actually say, well, you are basically being told this story in order for you to take this lesson. Take the lesson now and move on with the lesson where you would recognize that modesty in itself is the privilege. Not uncovering, but modesty is the privilege, and therefore the biggest fitna that you would be concerned about is the fitna of zina, or exposing or getting exposed. So things like, for example, inappropriate videos where people are uncovered, etc. All of that is basically a tool shaitan will use in order to expose people into the different types of fitan. So when we're speaking about perhaps maybe the method shaitan will use, looking at the shadda right there, it can be a gradual process. In the beginning, you probably got acquainted with a friend X or Y and Z, and then little by little, you started talking to them, you started going out for a coffee, and then you started having conversations. You're not yet influenced, but you just got acquainted. Now, of course, little by little, this will affect you, your identity, the way that you would vision things. It basically will be something that your brain will even start mimicking. The way that they would talk, the subjects that they would talk about, the argument, and all of these different things. And without you realizing, that was hidden all in this shadda right here when he said, he could have just said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayah could have just said, لا يفتنكم. But he didn't say, لا يفتنكم, لا يفتننكم. In other words, keep away and stay protected from, one, the gradual process of what shaitan will use in order to expose fitan to you, in order to lure you into that fitna, in order to perhaps drive you towards that fitna, or probably sway you away from the haqq, whether it's a gradual process or whether two, Whether two, it is in a way of a consistent behavior. It's one after another, and without you realizing, there's also that repetition. And with repetition, you basically become reprogrammed entirely. So when you say لا يفتننكم, whether we're speaking about in our modern terms, we might say do not get reprogrammed by shaitan. And when we say do not get reprogrammed, rewired, that basically lets us know that we have the tendency to basically get reprogrammed. We have the tendency to basically get into that type of fitna where we would lose our basis, we would lose our principles, and the way that shaitan uses it is by repetition. Now, on the other hand, if we were to flip this word, and if we are to say that we are designed in a way that we can get reprogrammed by one, exposing to something, getting exposed to something, two, repetition, and three, repetition or consistency, or perhaps maybe mimicking something, etc. How can we flip that? So, okay, I want to stay away from fitna. How can I flip that? And is it possible for me to flip it into a way that is basically rewiring my brain to the good side? Certainly. Like, for example, you go to the masjid and you see people doing dhikr, or you see people joining a halaqah. What do? You just rewired. You are at the beginning of rewiring your brain. So now you are basically exposed. You're coming to this class, and the more frequently you would attend these classes, or you would attend basically the seminars or whatever it is, the more frequently, the bigger the effect that it will have on your heart. So basically it goes both ways. You are rewiring yourself by attending these classes, by attending perhaps the halaqas, whatever it is, okay? And at the same time, when you want to make a change, you basically take that hijab away. Well, we're not talking about hijab off your head, or about no, we're talking about the barrier. The barrier that is basically put by shaitan. And of course, if it's amal salih, shaitan would put a barrier. That's that hijab that shaitan will put. Okay, shaitan will put a barrier and make you not see these classes either a good place, or not see these classes as something that you're interested in, or will probably use different ways to sway you away from listening to the class. Oh, the method is boring. I hate the voice tone, or repeats too much, or whatever it is. And then shaitan will use different methods to sway you away. Or maybe you don't have time, or maybe you can listen to the class on YouTube. This is available. Why are you joining in this class, etc. But then what happens is that it can be a method, and it's a method that shaitan will use to sway you away from good by exposing the different fitan instead. And this is really important when we speak about spiritual therapy. Part of spiritual therapy is by taking away all the different fitan that are there. So whether we're speaking about what people are seeing, what people are looking at, what people are listening to, what basically would be affecting the person's programming, the person's mind, the person, what they're listening to, and so forth. So لا يصرفنكم is another wording that لا يصرفنكم that al-Qurtubi had basically chosen. What's the difference between يفتننكم and يصرفنكم? صرف means to redirect. Redirect. Fatana means the meanings that I basically had mentioned. So how did al-Qurtubi actually say لا يصرفنكم? Redirect is the same. So redirect by redirecting you, by exposing you to different things. Then your vision is redirected. The emotions that result of it are redirected. And certainly you would see that you would be swaying away, you would be going away from basically the right path, and therefore you would be redirected in your aim, in your destination, and certainly in what procedures you would take in order to go there. So لا يصرفنكم الشيطان, away from what? عن دين الله, away from the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically. So how and what is the reason for this? ينزع عنهما لباسهما. That's another way of letting us know the meaning of fitna that is at least intended in this one. So ينزع عنهما لباسهما. The most important method that shaitan will use in order to, one, expose us to fitna is by uplifting or removing our garment, or removing basically and revealing the awrah. That's the first method that shaitan will use, is exposing the awrah, whether yours or even others, by exposing al-awrah. So that's why he said, يَنْزِعُ عَنْهُمَا لِبَاسَهُمَا. So how is it? Let's look into that ayah and actually see it again right there. How is it that that will be something that will affect us? Let's see right there. The ayah basically goes in more details. يَا بَنِي آدَمَ لَا يَفْتِنَنَّكُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ كَمَا أَخْرَجَ أَبَوَيْكُم مِّنَ الْجَنَّةِ. Telling the believers, do not let shaitan basically put you into fitna. We just talked about fitna and what that means. How? Kama, similar as to how your fathers. Fathers, is this fathers, or is this a father and a mother, or parents? Even and Hawa. It's basically even Hawa, not fathers, but it is talking about أبويكم. In لغة عربية, you can say, for example, القمران, to actually 2 moons, and would be referring to the sun and the moon. And if we were to talk about أبويكم, this isn't talking about your fathers, but this is actually talking about your parents. Which parents? Eve and Hawa. Eve and Adam, sorry. كما أخرج أبويكم من الجنة. So now the lesson is that do not let, speaking directly at the children of Adam, do not let shaitan expel you out of heaven, min al-Jannah, as the way that he had swayed, or he basically caused the eviction of Adam from Jannah. How does that happen? So here we go, a semicolon, if we were to put a punctuation mark here. يَنْزِعُ عَنْهُمَا لِبَاسَهُمَا. He would basically remove their garments away from them, and the main goal to why he will do that is لِيُرِيَهُمَا. And this is what that lam right there basically is indicating, for some weird reason, the mouse is playing games with me right now. Let's do it right there. Okay, so this lam is to let me know a very important indication, which is لِيُرِيَهُمَا سَوْآتِهِمَا. So what shaitan wanted them to basically do was really expose their awrah. And that's really important to mention, because when the awrah is exposed, then certainly becomes like a snowball where all the different fitan becomes easier and certainly exposed to that person, and then they become attracted to them. Okay, ينزع عنهما لباسهما ليريهما نصب بلام كي. So basically wanted to say that what this basically is talking about, it is right there, this lam, that's what he wanted to talk about, this lam right there in the word ليريهما. Okay, maybe I can make it bigger, that this lam is basically to indicate the meaning of kay. What is kay? In other words, it's giving me the explanation to what was the goal of Iblis. What did he want to do? Well, what he wanted to do was actually expose their awrah. إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ. Him, that is shaitan, he can see you, and so can qabiluhu. So can his qabil. What is qabil? Qabil, is that like a tribe? Yeah, that's one of the meanings of it. but can shaitan actually see us? Well, yeah. Can we see shaitan? Like, what about the people that are engaging in magic? Can they see shayateen? Is it possible that I can see a shaitan? So that's what we're going to discuss, inshallah, in just a bit. Okay, so what is al-qabil right there? So we're talking about al-qabil basically to mean his soldiers, supporters. Or is this talking about the jinn and the shayateen? All the jinn and shayateen would basically engage in that. Or is this talking about nasluhu, the offsprings, or jiluhu, or the different generations that will also be the ones to have this power or this goal to support shaitan in order to basically harm us. So certainly this ayah is indicating again a repeated advice or a repeated direction, which is to guard modesty and to basically consider modesty as a serious matter in order to protect us from shaitan. So that's the first thing. Okay, so when it says إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ, can the jinn actually see us? Yes, they can. Can we see them? Let's look into this one. Some scholars actually said this because it said min haythu la tarawnahum. What does it mean? From what you cannot see them in. Yeah, I can't see them. Is this an exclusive statement, or is this a statement that is basically speaking as a general comprehensive statement? Or is this talking about that in a comprehensive way, in general, you cannot see them, but is it possible that there can be some people that can see shaitan at different instances? Is it at all possible? So that's what some scholars wanted to discuss. Some scholars actually said this is an evidence that is the generalization of this statement, min haythu la tarawnahum, and you cannot see them. They said, well, this is an evidence that that there's no way that we can ever see the jinn. Can we hear their voices? Or is it only specific people? Or is it only the people that engage in sorcery, all of that, and they would be able to hear their voices or talk to them, etc.? Well, there's no question that all scholars agreed that talking to jinn and dealing with jinn is not permissible. But they also agreed that attempting to ask them to do something good or do something bad is also not permissible. But are we capable of hearing their voices? Differences of opinions between scholars. A lot of the things that relate to jinn, shayateen, magic as well, a lot of it is actually part of what is not based on science, by the way. So I cannot prove to you scientifically that this person has a jinn in them. There's no way that I can prove it scientifically to you, because science is based on studying motion, studying elements, so basically the different matters in motion. That's what we study in science. But shaitan is not matter anyways. He's not matter. He's not matter that you can study. But I will tell you that there are different ways to experiment the things around us. Part of that, certainly, you've got the text. And the second way is anecdotal. You can believe it or you cannot believe it. That's up to you. But with experience, you may see how certain people may actually speak with jinn or have some relations. And I don't know how to prove it to you other than I wish you were there in some of those cases that I had seen. I know I didn't used to believe this either. I used to think of it as nothing but fake. But then when I started doing ruqya, not because I wanted to do ruqya, people would come to me and would literally beg me to do them ruqya. I didn't want to do this whatsoever because at the time I was a person that didn't believe in any of this. Did not believe in any of this and thought it was nothing but an imagination and nothing but fake. But people would ask me to do ruqya, and I started doing ruqya little by little. I was just doing ruqya based on Quran, Fatiha 7 times, al-Ikhlas, al-Mu'awwidat, that was it. But then little by little, I rejected at the beginning, to be honest. I didn't accept it. And I thought, you just do it on your own. So they would be, please help us do it, just please. And these people would be just seeking anybody to do ruqya, to help their daughter, to help their loved one. And you know, if it means a lot to them. And so I attempted to do ruqya. And that's when that took me into a different world. I did the ruqya and I had seen many things that I had never whatsoever thought existed. Never thought it would existed. Never thought that this was at all possible to see somebody actually talking to me that I know 100% sure this person does not speak Arabic. And all of a sudden, this person understands what I'm saying. And I would be talking to them in Arabic, and they would respond not necessarily in Arabic, but I would say, "How many are you?" And I would say it in Arabic, and they would respond in English. How did this person that I am very certain that this person does not know Arabic all of a sudden is responding to my questions in English, but then I asked the questions in Arabic. Why didn't they say apple, pear, whatever it is? But they actually were responding in numbers. They were responding in this. I don't understand what happened. Or perhaps maybe I would fake. I had Hindus even come to me and ask me to do them ruqya because they heard that their jinn basically say, go to this person, ask them for ruqya, and this person is Hindu, not even Muslim. I can pretend to be reading Quran when I'm really reading really gibberish. But then the second that I would switch to reading Quran, they would start yelling out that they're feeling the burn. I don't know how to explain this, but say, إنه or إنه يراكم هو قبيله من حيث لا ترونهم. And if I were to say that this person basically behaved that way as to their expectations and all of that, well, this person does not speak Arabic. This person does not know Quran because they're even Hindu. This person does not know what the Quran is from what gibberish or probably just any words from a newspaper might actually be saying Yarhamkumullah. And they didn't know what that was. They don't even know what a Quran is. But then the second that I would be reading Quran or ayat al-ruqya specifically, that's when they would feel the burning. I could be reading from Surah al-Talaq and they would just be silent. The second that I would read ayat al-ruqya, that's when they would yell out that this is burning them. And they would basically start even vomiting blood. Explain that to me. How can anybody fake vomiting blood? I had seen this in my own eyes. How can I prove it to you scientifically? All I could say is, sorry, I cannot prove it to you scientifically because jinn is actually not matter in motion, and therefore you cannot detect shaitan in that way either. So all you need to know is that min haythu la tarawnahum, do scholars actually say that you can see shayateen? What does that even look like? So الجن basically cannot be seen. That's the first opinion that some scholars had actually said. And some other scholars said, جائز أن يروا. Other scholars actually said, actually, it is possible that you can see shayateen, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He would want you to see some shayateen or some of the jinn, that it is possible to see. I thought it would be a good idea to actually go to certain hadith that relate to this one. But before that, just bear with me. I'm going to take you to a different set of different hadith to understand it. Ibn Has, who's actually a scholar of more tafsir and nahu Arabi and the Arabic grammar, he said, well, what that means is that al-jinn, it doesn't have to be exclusive, meaning that it is impossible for you to see jinn, but in the general meaning, it can mean in Lugha Arabiya that in the general sense, you do not see jinn, but it is possible that whether it's a prophet or whether at other times, that perhaps maybe at other times people may be capable of seeing jinn. Same thing when we're talking about the Prophet ﷺ had basically seen the jinn, and he had a conversation with them. And of course, certainly al-Qushayri here, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically made it as part of the pattern and the paradigm in this creation, that the children of Adam cannot see shayateen today, but does that mean it is possible to break this rule? Perhaps maybe can jinn themselves actually do something similar to what humans can do and actually break certain laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in nature? So before you go in details, can you perhaps maybe indicate the ahadith that relate to this one? So the first hadith, إن الشيطان يجري من ابن آدم مجرى الدم. That's the first hadith. That shaitan goes through the veins of Ibn Adam, or the blood system of the son of Adam, exactly the way that blood goes into the system. What does that look like? Is that literally that, yeah, you've got shaitan in your bloodstream, man? Is that what it means? Or is that metaphorically to mean that shaitan would go in our bloodstream or as our bloodstream? So exactly if I were to say, Kulsum is as beautiful as a butterfly, does that mean she turned into a butterfly? That's a metaphor. I didn't mean that she became a butterfly that is going to be flying with like wings and all of that. Absolutely not. It's a metaphor. But some scholars actually said a metaphor in hadith or in Quran does not necessarily have to be containing all the complete truth, because it's supposed to be kind of like a simile. Other scholars said that no, it has to be in complete truth. Well, it doesn't mean that Kulsum would turn into a butterfly or she is as a butterfly, but it means that there are certain commonalities. She's beautiful, the butterfly is beautiful, or the butterfly is gentle, and so is Kulsum. She's gentle too. So therefore, we would see the commonalities, and we would create this kind of simile. Okay. Now, if we were to look at Inna Shaitana Yajri min ibni Adam majra dam, is this giving me a simile? That similar to the blood flowing in our system, shaitan flows as in a similar way within our system. Or does that mean shaitan actually goes into our system and controls perhaps maybe our blood, or controls our senses, or probably controls our relationship with the world around us? What does that actually mean? إن الشيطان يجري من ابن آدم مجرى الدم. The two differences of opinions between scholars, whether this is metaphorical or whether this is literal, is the same explanation as what both of the opinions actually said in regards to this one. Can we see shayateen or not? The first opinion said, yes, we can see shayateen, because they understood it as, hey, look, they're actually part of our system. Then we can. The second opinion, no, we cannot. This is a metaphor. This isn't talking about shayateen basically being something that we could visualize. Let's see. And the same evidences, الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس, the one that would whisper in the chests of people. So if we're talking about sudur الناس, we're talking about chests. In other words, do they become part of our anatomy? When it said yuwaswas. So what is the word yuwaswas? Yuwaswas basically means to make a hidden communication, a subtle communication, a subtle type of communication between basically Ibn Adam and Shaitan or Jinn. So where is this subtle communication happening in? It's in Sadr, not in the brain, but in the Sadr. So the communication happens in a certain receptor in a Sadr. Well, like, where is that Sadr? Sadr means chest, but that's not the only meaning to it. Sadr can mean chest and could also mean the core of something. That's a Sadr, the core of something or the chest. So does that mean shaitan is affecting our anatomy? It can be possible that they can affect our anatomy. But at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us know that shaitan and influencing our body or influencing our heart or influencing our mind is deeply dependent on how much of containment or how much of acceptance that you would basically allow to happen, which is actually indicated in this hadith. Inna lil malaki lamma wa lishaytani lamma. فأما لمة الملك فإيعاد بالخير وتصديق بالحق وأما لمة الشيطان فإيعاد بالشر وتكذيب بالحق. Now, what does that mean? First, I want you to look at this one. Lamma is basically talking about the different ideas that come and occur to you in your heart. So what is that? Another wording for it during our times, we would call it an inspiration. So when you say inna lil malaki lamma, angels would have an inspiration in your heart to do good, to get up and do qiyam al-layl, to memorize Quran, to do something that is probably within your home, help your mother work, help your mother do this, or probably you're helping your brother, you're helping your siblings, etc. That's lammatul malik. Lamma means an inspiration. Lamma means something that you would basically signal to that. So there's an angel that would give you a good signal, and then الشيطان فأما الملك فإعاد بالخير وتصديق بالحق. So what does the inspiration that an angel would give us be like? Well, إعاد بالخير. It would inspire you to do what is good or confirm basically truth. Embrace truth. أما لمة الشيطان فإعاد بالشر وتكذيب بالحق. As for the shaitan's inspiration, it basically comes in inspiring the person to do evil things and denying truth. But guess what? Yes, you could see in this hadith, there are a number of different things that we can learn from, but I thought it would be important to actually discuss these hadith in further explanation, and which is why I thought it would be a good idea to go to this one, al-qarin. What is al-qarin? So every single person has a qarin. Like a shaitan, like a jinn? Yes. You have a qareen, so do I. What about the Prophet ﷺ? Does he have a qareen too? Yes. But something happened to his qareen. What happened? So the Prophet ﷺ said, ما منكم من أحد إلا وقد وكل به قرينه من الجن. قالوا وإياك يا رسول الله. قال وإياي إلا أن الله أعانني عليه فأسلم or فأسلم or فأسلم. All right, let's see. What does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ said every single person is basically held, or there's a grip by a qareen on this person from al-jinn. There's a grip that this qareen is holding on to you. In other words, they know what you like. They're always there. They know what you like. They know what you behave in. They know all your privacies. They know each and every single thing. And then the Sahaba said, what about you? Do you have one too? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, I have one too. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'anani alayh. He supported me against him. The first narration, فَأَسْلَمْ. He had become Muslim. The second narration, فَأَسْلِمْ. So I can be safe and protected. Okay, that's the second one. فَلَا يَأْمُرَنِي إِلَّا بِخَيْرٍ. He would therefore only inspire me to do what is good. You can see that this hadith is narrated by Sahih Muslim. At the same time, there are certain things that are supposed to help you in order to basically stay one, either Aslam, for him to become Muslim, or for him to basically surrender, and therefore you would be protected. Let's see, what are some of those du'as? وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ رَبِّ أَن يَحْضُرُونَ. And say, Ya Allah, I seek refuge in you from the whispers of shayateen, and I seek refuge in you from their presence. Other words, when they are present, you are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from their presence. Let's see, the Prophet ﷺ, look at this hadith. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ وَاضِعٌ خَطْمَهُ عَلَى قَلْبِ ابْنِ آدَمَ فَإِنْ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى خَنَسَ وَإِنْ نَسِيَ اللَّهَ الْتَقَمَ قَلْبُهُ. Okay, let's see right there. Wanted to actually take you to that hadith because if we're talking about that shaitan basically has his nose. Shaitan would, al-khatm is either a nose or a trunk, that it would be on the heart of Ibn Adam. And if the person, in dhakar Allah, basically if Ibn Adam or the son of Adam would mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the shaitan then becomes quiet. And if this person forgets the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, iltaqama qalbah. He would basically get that grip on Ibn Adam's heart, and that grip is basically called al-waswas. That's one thing. But guess what? This hadith is actually da'if. It's not an authentic hadith. But there is a similar hadith that is actually in Sahih al-Bukhari. Let's see what that means. That the Prophet ﷺ would tie a knot at the forehead of a person when they would sleep. He would tie 3 knots on the person's head. The first, on every single knot, he would basically give like a strike on it. And then the first strike, he would say, you have a long night, so sleep tight. And then when they would wake up and mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that tight would basically now, the first knot would untie. If this person then makes wudu, the second knot would untie. And then if they prayed, the third knot would untie, and they would be waking up full of activity, and their hearts would be طيب النفس. They would be feeling enthusiastic. They would be feeling basically happy that day. And if they basically still had this knot or these 3 knots basically tied on their head, they would wake up lazy. They would wake up with khabith al-nafs. Khabith al-nafs basically means that their nafs is basically ready to engage in the wrong thing. Now, this hadith is basically an alternative to the one we had mentioned before that was da'if, and you could see it is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Now, but that still doesn't answer the question when we're speaking about al-qareen. So we needed to further continue. Al-qari basically says that if a person would mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically let the shaitan either fly away or inqabad al-shaitan. Inqabad, it's like he just trembles right there and then would run away. And then if he's more accepting, he'll come back and check up on him every single once in a while to see, am I ready? Is he not right now ready. So think of it as the dhikr power wearing off from that person. So what should we do when we find that? Well, أعوذ بك أعوذ وقل ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. So say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let the shaitan basically go away, because the shaitan recognizes the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that when you say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, that's what will empower you. That's what will empower you. Okay, I will stop right here because definitely we basically had exceeded our timing. So inshallah, we will continue tomorrow, and we have this page to continue, but I will continue it inshallah tomorrow. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them inshallah. Okay, what I will do, inshallah, will stop right here, and inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow.